Shadows of Liberty, the Ghost of Manhattan. In the frigid winter of 1776, George Washington sat by a dying fire, a man defeated. The British had taken New York, his army was in tatters, and the dream of a free America was bleeding out into the snow. But Washington had a secret weapon that no musket could match. He didn't need more soldiers, he needed ghosts. He needed men and women who could drink with the enemy, smile at their secrets, and whisper the truth across the enemy lines. This is the true untold saga of the Culper spy ring, the ordinary shopkeepers, housewives, and farmers who became the most dangerous weapon in the American Revolution. Chapter 1: The Hangman's Tie. The air in Manhattan was thick with the smell of scorched earth and the metallic tang of fear. Nathan Hale stood on the back of a wagon, a rough hemp noose scratching his neck. He was 21 years old, a Yale graduate and a school teacher. He was also a failed spy. General William Howe's soldiers stood in a rigid line, their redcoats bright against the drab gray of the morning. To them, Hale was a nuisance, a naive boy caught with sketches of British fortifications hidden in his shoes. "Any last words, rebel?" the executioner sneered. Hale looked out over the crowd. He didn't see enemies. He saw a city under occupation. He saw the potential of a nation. "I only regret," he whispered, his voice cracking but firm, "that I have but one life to lose for my country." The trapdoor dropped. The snap of the rope echoed through the streets of New York, a sound that reached all the way to Washington's headquarters across the river. Washington heard the news of Hale's death with a heavy heart, but also with a cold realization. The old way of spying, sending a brave man in a uniform to peek over fences, was dead. To beat the British, he had to become the British. He needed a network. He needed a ring. Chapter 2: The Tavern Keeper's Son. Setauket, Long Island, was a sleepy town of salt marshes and quiet harbors, now crawling with redcoats. Among the locals was Abraham Woodhull, a man with a nervous disposition and a family name that carried weight. Abraham was not a warrior. He was a farmer who preferred the company of his cabbage patches to the roar of cannons. But Abraham had a childhood friend who had risen through the ranks of Washington's army, Benjamin Tallmadge. Tallmadge was the Director of Military Intelligence, a title that sounded far grander than his actual resources. He knew that the only way to get information out of New York-occupied city was to use people the British would never suspect. He approached Abe under the cover of darkness. "Abe," he said, the two of them hidden in the shadows of a barn, "New York is a fortress. Washington is blind. If we don't know when Clinton plans to move, the revolution ends by spring." "I'm a farmer, Ben," replied Abe, his hands shaking. "I have a father to look after. If they catch me, I'll end up like Hale." "They won't catch you," whispered Tallmadge, "because you won't be a spy. You'll be a businessman. You'll go to New York to sell your goods. You'll visit your sister. You'll sit in the taverns, and you will listen." Thus, the Culper was born. Abraham Woodhull took the code name Samuel Culper. To the world, he was a loyalist farmer. To the Continental Army, he was Agent 722. Chapter 3: The Invisible Ink. The risk was astronomical. Traveling from Setauket to Manhattan required crossing British checkpoints. Every scrap of paper was a death warrant. But Washington, a lover of gadgetry and science, had a solution. He provided the ring with a sympathetic stain, a primitive form of invisible ink developed by Sir James J. The process was complex. One bottle contained the stain, the ink, and another contained the counterpart, the developer. Woodhull would write a mundane letter to his uncle about the price of hay or the health of his sheep. Between the lines, written in the invisible stain, were the troop movements of the British 17th Light Dragoons. In a small, cramped room in Manhattan, Woodhull sat by a candle, his eyes stinging. He was surrounded by British officers who lived in the same boarding house. He could hear them laughing in the hallway, boasting about how they would crush the rebel scum. His pen moved across the paper. The fleet at Sandy Hook prepares to sail. 3,000 men. Destination, Newport. The ink vanished as it dried. To any guard who intercepted the letter, it was just a bored farmer writing home. Chapter 4. The Lady of the Laundry. While Woodhull gathered information in the city, he needed a way to get it across the Long Island Sound to Tallmadge in Connecticut. This is where the story takes a turn into the legendary. Enter Anna Smith Strong. Anna was a neighbor of Woodhull in Setauket. Her husband had been imprisoned on a British Hale ship, the rotting hulks in New York Harbor, where thousands of Americans died of disease. She had every reason to hate the crown. She became the signalman of the ring. Whenever a courier, a brave whaleboat captain named Caleb Brewster, arrived in the secret coves of Setauket, Woodhull needed to know. Anna would hang her laundry in a specific pattern. A black petticoat meant a courier had arrived. The number of white handkerchiefs hung next to it told Woodhull which secret cove Brewster was hiding in. 1 handkerchief for Cove 1, 2 for Cove 2. The British patrols walked right past her clothesline every day. They saw a woman doing her chores. They never realized they were looking at the most sophisticated signaling system in the Western Hemisphere. Chapter 5. Agent 355. As the ring expanded, a new figure emerged, a shadow within a shadow. In the official ledgers, she was known only by a number, 355. In the 18th century code book used by the ring, 355 meant lady. Historians still debate her identity to this day. Was she a socialite who attended the lavish balls thrown by British General John Andre? Was she a maid in the house of a high-ranking officer? Whoever she was, Agent 355 was brilliant. She moved through the elite circles of New York society, where the wine flowed freely and tongues wagged. While Woodhull focused on numbers and logistics, 355 focused on the human intelligence. She learned of a plot that would have ended the war in a single night. Benedict Arnold, Washington's most trusted general, was planning to surrender West Point to the British. The information came from Agent 355. She had overheard a conversation between Major John Andre and a fellow officer. The betrayal was deep. The stakes were everything. Chapter 6. The Black Chamber. The British were not fools. They knew there was a leak. They formed their own Black Chamber, a unit dedicated to intercepting and deciphering rebel mail. Major John Andre, the dashing and sophisticated head of British intelligence, was obsessed with finding Culper. He increased patrols in Setauket. He placed spies inside the American camps. Woodhull began to feel the noose tightening. His health began to fail under the stress. He was seeing redcoats in every shadow. "I cannot go back to the city," Woodhull wrote to Tallmadge. "The risk is too great. They are watching the boarding houses." But Washington was relentless. "The information must flow," he commanded. To save the ring, a new lead agent was needed, someone even more invisible than a farmer. Enter Robert Townsend. Chapter 9. The Vulture in the Hudson. September 1780. The air turned crisp along the Hudson River. A British sloop of war, the Vulture, sat anchored in the dark waters near West Point. Inside the fort, Benedict Arnold was finalizing the sale of his soul. He had requested command of West Point specifically to hand it over. For £20,000 and a general's commission in the British Army, he would give Clinton the key to the colonies. If West Point fell, the British would control the Hudson, splitting the northern colonies from the south. The war would be over. Major John Andre was sent to meet Arnold in person. He traveled in disguise, wearing a civilian coat over his uniform, calling himself Mr. John Anderson. The meeting happened in the woods at midnight. The two men huddled over maps, the smell of damp pine needles thick around them. Arnold handed Andre the sketches of the fort's weaknesses, hidden inside Andre's stockings. As Andre attempted to return to New York by land, he was stopped near Tarrytown by three men. They weren't soldiers, they were local militiamen, John Paulding, David Williams, and Isaac Van Wart, looking for cattle thieves. "What party do you belong to?" they asked. Andre, thinking they were loyalists, replied, "The lower party." He showed him his watch, a sign of wealth. The men grew suspicious. They stripped him. When they reached his boots, the papers fell out. "This is a spy!" Paulding shouted. The news raced to West Point. Arnold, sitting at breakfast with Washington's aides, received the word that Anderson had been captured. He didn't hesitate. He abandoned his wife, his child, and his honor, fleeing to the Vulture. Chapter 10. The Noose and the Tear. The capture of John Andre was a triumph for American intelligence, but a tragedy for the man himself. Andre was charming, talented, and well-liked even by his enemies. Benjamin Tallmadge was the one who oversaw Andre's captivity. The two men, both young, both intelligence officers, sat together in the prison cell. They talked of poetry and war. "Will I be shot as a soldier?" Andre asked. Tallmadge looked away. He remembered Nathan Hale. He remembered the cold snap of the rope. "You will be hanged as a spy," he replied. On October 2nd, 1780, Andre walked to the gallows with more dignity than the man who had betrayed him. He adjusted the noose himself. Washington, watching from a distance, refused to see him. Rules were rules. The golden boy of the British Army was dead. But the fallout for the Culper Ring was immediate. The British were humiliated. Clinton wanted blood. He knew Andre had been caught because of a leak from within New York. The hunt for the culper began in earnest. Chapter 11. The Fate of 355. The British began a sweep of the city. Every woman who had been seen at the balls with Andre, every merchant who frequented the coffee houses was under suspicion. Agent 355 vanished. Some reports say she was arrested and taken to the HMS Jersey, the most notorious of the prison ships. The Jersey was a tomb. It was an old 64-gun ship, stripped of its masts, where prisoners were packed like sardines in the hold. The air was poisonous, and smallpox was a constant companion. If 355 was there, she died as she lived, a ghost. No record of her name was ever found. No grave marks her sacrifice. She was the lady who gave everything for a country that didn't even know her name. Robert Townsend was devastated. The loss of his partner and the constant threat of discovery turned his hair gray. He retreated further into his shell, becoming a ghost himself. He continued to send reports, but the joy of the game was gone. Chapter 12. The Trap at Yorktown. The year 1781 arrived with a glimmer of hope. The French fleet under Admiral de Grasse was finally nearing the American coast. Washington was in a bind. He wanted to attack New York, the crown jewel of British occupation, But Townsend sent a report that changed everything. Clinton has reinforced the city. The fortifications are impenetrable. But Cornwallis has moved his army to a small tobacco port in Virginia, a place called Yorktown. Townsend's report was backed by intelligence gathered from a news source, James Armistead, an enslaved man who had successfully infiltrated the camp of Cornwallis himself. Washington saw the opening. He realized he could trap Cornwallis between his army and the French fleet, but he had to trick Clinton into thinking he was still attacking New York. He ordered his men to build huge bread ovens in New Jersey, visible to British scouts. He leaked fake documents through the Culper Ring, suggesting a massive siege of Manhattan was imminent. Clinton fell for it. He ordered Cornwallis to stay put and send reinforcements to New York. By the time Clinton realized the American army was marching south to Virginia, it was too late. The trap snapped shut. On October 19, 1781, as the British band played The World Turned Upside Down, Cornwallis surrendered. The war was effectively over. Chapter 13. The Silent Victory. When the British finally evacuated New York in 1783, Washington rode into the city at the head of his troops. He did something unusual. He didn't go to a grand lala or a victory parade first. He went to a small dry goods store on Peck Slip. He sat down with Robert Townsend. They didn't talk for long. There were no medals, no public proclamations. Washington simply thanked the man who had been his eyes for 5 long years. Townsend asked for only one thing, that his identity never be revealed. He was a Quaker. His family were Loyalists. If his neighbors knew what he had done, he would be an outcast. Washington kept his word. The members of the Culper Ring went back to their lives. Abraham Woodhull went back to his cabbages. Anna Strong went back to her laundry. Caleb Brewster went back to the sea. Benjamin Tallmadge became a congressman, but he never wrote a memoir about the ghosts he had led. For 150 years, the Culper Ring was a forgotten footnote in history. It wasn't until 1930 when a historian named Morton Pennypacker began cross-referencing Robert Townsend's handwriting with the letters of Samuel Culper, Jr., that the truth came to light. The farmers and shopkeepers of Long Island saved the Revolution, and they did it without ever firing a shot. Epilogue: The Modern Shadow. Today, the road from Setauket to Manhattan is a bustling highway. But if you stand on the shore of the Long Island Sound on a misty morning, you can almost see a whaleboat slipping through the fog. You can almost see a black petticoat flapping in the wind. The legacy of the Culper Ring lives on in the DNA of American intelligence. They taught a young nation that bravery isn't always found on a battlefield. Sometimes it's found in the scratching of a pen, the pattern of a laundry line, and the courage to remain invisible. Liberty has many fathers, but its most vital protectors are often its ghosts.